There is a name for it in the repair manuals. Not the official ones, the clean, corporate documents that live in server rooms and get updated by committees. The real ones. The ones passed between technicians on shop floors and printed in the back of electronics trade magazines in the 1970s. The term is percussive maintenance, and it means exactly what you think it means, hitting the thing until it works. It sounds like a joke. It is a joke. And it is also, documented in peer-reviewed literature, a legitimate diagnostic and remedial technique used in aerospace, medical equipment, consumer electronics, and professional audio engineering. So before you dismiss the IT guy who slapped the side of your monitor and fixed it, he was practicing engineering. You just didn't know the vocabulary. And if that surprises you, wait until you hear what NASA has to say about it. This is Tech Reporter, and this is the story of why the dumbest fix in electronics is also one of the most scientifically defensible things you can do to a broken machine. If you have ever fixed something by hitting it and felt vaguely embarrassed about it, subscribe to Tech Reporter right now, because this channel is specifically for people who want the real explanation behind the things that should not work but do. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's get into it. Most people operate on a simple mental model of how electronics work. Circuits are either connected or they aren't. Current flows or it doesn't. The transistor switches or it fails. This model is not wrong, exactly. It's just dangerously incomplete. Because the third state, the intermittent connection, is where most real-world failures actually live. And intermittent connections are uniquely, almost specifically responsive to physical force. This is not folk wisdom. This is material science. And once you understand the mechanism, you stop feeling embarrassed about the fix and start feeling embarrassed that it took you this long to understand why it worked. Everything inside a piece of electronics that is more than a few years old is contracting and expanding constantly. Not visibly, not dramatically, but at the microscopic level, every power cycle, every time the device heats up and cools down, the solder joints that hold components to circuit boards are flexing. Copper traces are expanding. Connector pins are shifting by fractions of a millimeter. Over thousands of cycles, those fractions accumulate into something measurable, something consequential. A solder joint that was once a clean, crystalline bond begins to develop microfractures, cracks so small they are invisible to the naked eye, often invisible even under low magnification inspection. The component is still attached. The circuit still measures as continuous under a static test. But the moment current flows and the board warms up slightly, that joint shifts, resistance spikes, and the device misbehaves. You hit it. The joint flexes back toward contact. The device works. You did not fix it permanently. You postpone the failure. But you also did not imagine it, and you were not being irrational. You were, without knowing it, applying a corrective mechanical force to a fatigue-fractured solder joint. Which is a sentence that sounds considerably more professional than what actually happened, but the physics are identical. The documented history of this practice runs much deeper than consumer frustration. During the Second World War, military field technicians operating radar equipment in the Pacific Theater reported a consistent finding. Vacuum tube assemblies that had developed faults under the vibration of naval vessels would sometimes restore function when struck or shaken. This was not celebrated in the field reports. It was cataloged, carefully, because the implication was analytically useful. If physical stress was causing failures, and physical stress was also sometimes causing restorations, then the failure mode was mechanical rather than purely electrical. That distinction changed how equipment was designed, how tolerances were specified, and how field repairs were formally authorized. The military did not encourage technicians to hit things randomly, but they did document that hitting things, applied correctly, was addressing a real and identifiable class of failure. NASA encountered the same phenomenon in a considerably higher stakes context. The Voyager spacecraft, launched in 1977, carry instruments that were engineered to survive years of vibration during launch and then decades of thermal cycling in the vacuum of deep space. The engineering documentation for components aboard those spacecraft includes provisions for what are carefully described as mechanical interventions, specified ranges of force applied to specified locations, intended to restore function in connectors and relay assemblies that have shifted under thermal stress. The language in those documents is precise and deliberate. The underlying principle is the same one your grandfather used on the television set. The space probe that has been traveling for 47 years was, at certain documented moments in its operational history, restored to function by the application of controlled physical force. If that fact does not reframe your understanding of what counts as legitimate engineering, very little will. The reason this knowledge persists informally, rather than formally, is not ignorance. It is institutional incentive, and the distinction matters. Engineering, as a professional identity, is constructed around precision, prediction, and control. Percussive maintenance violates that narrative structurally. It introduces randomness into a discipline that is philosophically allergic to randomness. Admitting that hitting something works means admitting that something failed in a way that was not fully anticipated, and that the repair cannot be fully quantified or reproduced on demand. Both of those admissions carry professional cost. There is also the liability dimension. Manufacturers warranty products against manufacturing defects. They do not warranty against user-applied force. The moment a technician formally documents that a product was struck and subsequently functioned, they have created an exposure record. It is administratively cleaner to replace the board. It is professionally safer to log the fault as unexplained. It is economically preferable, from the manufacturer's perspective, for you to believe that the fix was a coincidence rather than a technique. So the knowledge lives in repair shops and trade conversations and 40-year-old technician folklore, passed down not because institutions refused to discover it, but because institutions had reasons not to publish it. Cold solder joints are the most common culprit behind failures that respond to physical force, but they are not the only one. Electrolytic capacitors, the cylindrical components present on almost every circuit board manufactured before roughly 2010, have a finite lifespan governed by chemistry, not just by use. The electrolyte inside them slowly evaporates through the rubber seal at their base over years of thermal cycling. As they age, they lose capacitance. In severe cases, they bulge visibly or vent. But in the moderate cases, the ones that produce the symptoms most users actually experience, they simply become inconsistent. Their electrical behavior varies with temperature, with vibration, with the microscopic distribution of remaining electrolyte. A sharp tap to the board can temporarily shift that distribution enough to restore consistent function. You have not repaired the capacitor. You have bought yourself time. But you have also correctly identified that the failure is physical and chemical, not logical, which is the diagnostic insight that determines whether your next step is a software update or a soldering iron. Connector oxidation is the third major category, and it explains one of the most common repair recommendations in consumer electronics: reseating your RAM. The gold plating on connector pins is thin by design and finite by nature. Over time, the underlying copper oxidizes, and copper oxide is resistive in a way that pure copper is not. It does not stop current entirely. It impedes it unevenly, producing noise, instability, intermittent failure. A firm press on a connector, or the act of removing and reinserting a memory module, breaks through the oxide layer mechanically. The repeated friction of insertion and extraction scrapes the contact surface clean in a way that no spray or chemical treatment replicates as reliably. This is why reseating RAM fixes machines that appear fundamentally broken. You are not performing a ritual. You are removing a resistive oxide layer from a conductor. The machine works afterward because the connection is now what it was supposed to be when it was manufactured. None of this is a license to hit things indiscriminately, and the line between productive percussion and catastrophic escalation is specific and important. Hard disk drives, the spinning platter kind that were standard in laptops and desktops until solid-state storage became affordable, contain read and write heads that float nanometers above a magnetic surface spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. The tolerance is engineered to that precision by necessity. If the drive has failed because those heads have contacted the platter, what the industry calls a head crash, vibration does not restore it. Every additional revolution is grinding magnetic material across the surface where your data lives. Applying force to a drive that is producing rhythmic mechanical clicking does not help. It accelerates the destruction of the one thing you were hoping to recover. The correct response to a clicking drive is immediate power off, not percussion. Similarly, solid-state storage has no mechanical components to reseat and no solder joints that benefit from pressure in the same way. The failures in NAND flash are electrical and chemical at the cellular level. Cells written too many times, charge leaked across isolation barriers, controllers that have exhausted their bad block tables. Physical force addresses none of those conditions. The first discipline of percussive maintenance is not knowing when to apply it. It is knowing when not to. There is a version of this story that ends with a simple celebration of intuition over credentialism. The pragmatic repairman outsmarting the overeducated engineer. That version is satisfying and completely wrong. The physics behind percussive maintenance is well understood by the people who design the systems it addresses. The failure modes it corrects are documented in material science literature with more precision than most people expect. The reason it exists as informal knowledge rather than formal practice is not that engineers haven't figured it out. It is that the institutional structures around manufacturing, warranty, and liability create powerful incentives to keep that knowledge informal. Which means the actual lesson is not that hitting things is smart. It is that understanding why hitting things sometimes works makes you a more accurate diagnostician. It gives you a framework for deciding, in the moment, whether the failure in front of you is a mechanical fatigue problem in a physical system, a software corruption in a logical one, or a chemical degradation that has moved past the point where any intervention restores it. Most people who strike a misbehaving device and have it restore function are correct in their diagnosis. They have identified, without formal vocabulary, that the failure is mechanical and intermittent rather than permanent and fundamental. The hit is not magic. It is an applied force to a specific class of failure that responds to applied force. The embarrassment was never about the technique. It was always about not having the language to explain what you already understood. The next time someone with a service contract and a clipboard tells you that is not a recognized repair procedure, and they will say exactly that, you can let them replace the board. You can wait 3 weeks for the part to arrive. You can pay the diagnostic fee for a fault that disappears the moment the technician powers the unit on in a warm shop. Or you can understand what is actually happening inside the machine, apply the minimum necessary force to the correct location based on the correct diagnosis, and move on. Both paths reach the same destination. One of them requires you to know what you are doing. Now you do. If this changed how you think about the machines you use every day, you are exactly who Tech Reporter exists for. Subscribe to Tech Reporter for the real explanations behind the technology that runs your life, not the simplified version, not the marketing version, the actual version. Every video on this channel starts with a question that deserves a better answer than the one you have been given. Come find the rest of them.